for bringing me on. I mean, it was also great hearing from Amy this morning, and hopefully I can bring another kind of perspective of like the kind of work that we do at Adobe. And very much this presentation is geared for those of you here that are maybe interested in applying to Adobe, working at Adobe, and want to kind of know a little bit more about the creative process of some of the projects that we do, especially around AI. This presentation is also geared for those that want to get started with AI, but maybe aren't sure yet how to get started because it could feel potentially daunting. Or maybe there's those of you here that are not familiar at all, and I'm here to help kind of get you inspired and get started. So this presentation is called Embracing the AI Era, an Insider's Guide to AI-Powered Creativity in Photoshop. And a little bit about myself. My name is Davis Brown. I'm an experienced designer for AI and ML features, most specifically inside of Photoshop. I'm an AI artist. I'm one of the designers for neural filters, and I'm also the designer for generative fill and the patent inventor for non-destructive generative layers. In addition to that, I also do live in Seattle, Washington. So I love to go hiking, and especially now as the weather's getting better, it's just absolutely beautiful here. My wife, Laura, actually goes to her master's program at UW as well. So it's been fun being on campus and just seeing and just being around there. And then also recently last year, got married, and this actual wedding invite card you see here was generated with AI, and it was really fun to kind of work on this together and kind of create this card that we could share out with our family and friends. So now, I could kind of walk through some of the things I'm working on, but I think it'd be even better to give you a live demo of some of the features that we brought to Photoshop, and you can kind of get a better picture of some of the things that I work on. And for maybe some of you here, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts in chat while I'm sharing this for those that maybe have already used these features in Photoshop. But also this is a chance for me to kind of share with you some things that could be helpful in your own creative process if you're not aware of it yet. So for instance, Photoshop recently released a new feature called Generative Expand. So let's say you have this nice photo that you took on a hike, but you want to make this to a 16:9 aspect ratio. So what you would do is go to the crop tool, and then from the crop tool, you can change your aspect ratio to 16:9. And let's expand this here like this. And then what you can do is you can write a prompt for something you want to generate into the scene, or you can just leave this empty. And then what it'll do is magically fill in the transparent region to expand this image. So this is one of the very first experiences that we built into Photoshop leveraging AI. And we saw this and pinpointed a scenario where many times photographers had a photo, but they just needed it at a new aspect ratio. And this was an experience we wanted to really build like a seamless experience around for our users. And here we go. So here are a couple examples where we were able to create 3 new variations from that original image. And I can go toggle through them here. And like that's one of the real big kind of superpowers of generative AI is you can just create these like infinite array of variations to work with. And we wanted to build an experience around that where we created a whole new generative layer type that contained these variations for you to work with. In addition to that, let me show you kind of another fun feature that was actually recently released to our beta version of Photoshop. If you have this image here, and maybe you took this kind of like I took this photo in a parking lot, and it's interesting, but I want to show myself on top of Mount Rainier, and maybe I don't have the time to go hiking out there. So what you can do here from the contextual taskbar is select Remove Background. And what it's going to first do is remove the background. And then there's a new action here called Generate Background. And what's really amazing about this workflow that one of the designers on the team, Siashi, built was it was integrated into an experience that users were already using, which was remove background, and then augmenting that experience with generative AI. So if I go here and I click generate background and I type Mount Rainier, selfie, and let's see what we get. So this is a live demo, so we never know exactly if it's going to be perfect, but hopefully this gives a good result here. So again, we're getting our generative layer, and there we go. Didn't have to go travel out to Mount Rainier. We have a couple variations here to choose from, and this one's pretty nice. And what it's doing is it's actually matching to the color of the original image to then generate a scene that looks harmonized and well balanced. And this feature is also really great for product advertising. So let's say you took like a photo of a mug or a t-shirt and you want to place it on a nice backdrop and you don't really have the setup at the moment to do a photo shoot. This is an example where you can just kind of generate a background to get some ideas started. And one last feature I'd like to share with you before kind of diving into some of my, or like our creative process as a team, is a new feature called Generate Image. And from here, you can go to the toolbar and select this button here at the bottom, and you can type in a prompt, or you can select from one of these preset images. And something we identified early on in the kind of creative process building this experience is that many times for new users that are using this generative technology, it's hard to figure out a prompt to write because it's just so infinite, the kind of things you can generate with AI, that we wanted to have this really extensive and just beautiful gallery of prompts for you to get started with. In addition to that, we also wanted to have effects that you can kind of browse through to kind of figure out all the things you can create. Because for maybe some of you here that have tried working with AI and image generation specifically, it's always hard to you have an idea of what you want, but you might not know the right word or the right term to generate that image. So that's why we have this gallery of effects to choose from that you can kind of find, maybe I want futuristic or simple or divine, these different terms that you can kind of add on to the image to help create exactly what you want. So I selected this prompt of a Shiba Inu standing on Mars with beautiful clouds, a planet in the sky. And there we go. We get, again, 3 different variations. And it's all saved as a new layer in our layers panel. And it's just really fun to kind of experiment with different words, prompts, maybe reference images and effects to kind of get exactly what you want. And yeah, I think we're all really excited about some of these new experiences that we've brought to Photoshop. And with that, I'll go over back to the presentation and share with you a bit more about the creative process to create those tools. So at the moment, we've had almost 7 billion images generated from Firefly.com and in Photoshop. And it's just pretty mind-boggling to imagine that many images have been generated, and that people have these images in their Photoshop document. Maybe they've shared it to social media. And it's just wild to hear that number and just the kind of impact that's been had from these features. In addition to that, another kind of reason that I feel like we're in this AI era is that these AI features have so much draw from new users, people who've never used Photoshop before, and it's also creating a lot of impact, great impact on the business. So for instance, initially in our Photoshop beta app, we had an average of around 10,000 users, but at the first launch of Generative Fill, we had 3 million beta users at one point in the first couple months of the first Generative Fill release. So there's this huge signal that there's interest in this area, and we need to kind of start investing more time and energy in this space. So as I kind of continue with this presentation, there's going to be 3 kind of main themes. So first, I want to share a little bit about my daily work as a designer on Photoshop. This is something I get asked a lot about when I speak with students or other designers that are looking to apply to Adobe. I also want to share a bit about what I've learned designing for AI creative tools, because there's just so many things that you kind of learn along the way that you don't learn unless you actually have built something from scratch and actually shipped it into a product. And then I also want to share a bit about some of the AI trends that you should be aware of and how you can stay ahead of the curve So these are things that maybe you can implement into your own design work or start to think about so that you're ahead of the curve and you can catch the wave when some of these things start to kind of become more ubiquitous. So what does my daily work look like as a designer on Photoshop? And it's really interesting. I feel like maybe for me, this is particularly unique, or maybe because the space we're in is so drastically changing all the time. But the first phase is play. And I play with the latest AI technology to get inspired. And in addition to that, there's also a lot of work going on to social media and just researching what other people are creating too. So I think that's the first phase. The second phase is future concept design. So after you've kind of played and experimented, this is when you kind of start to get more onto like get the pen to the paper and start to ideate and put these visions to life with actual some visuals. And this is also when we start to get these concepts and work really closely with product managers like Amy to make sure we're heading in the right direction and targeting the right users and targeting the right metrics that Photoshop is aiming for. And so this is a really kind of big phase of the creative process from the day-to-day work. Then the third phase is to gather user validation and feedback. So we kind of played, got experiments going, we did some concept design, and now we put these concept designs in front of users to kind of see which ones they resonate with the most and which ones we should focus our attention on. And then there's this like last phase where you just drop everything else because you're so heads down to ship a product. And at this point, this is when you're working really closely between engineering, product, marketing, legal, ethics, like across a huge array of teams to just try to get the best experience out the door to your users. And after seeing kind of that overview, I just want to dive into a couple of the categories more deeply. So the first one is play and how you can play with the latest AI technology and get inspired. So I might be kind of an extreme case, but I spend way too much on fun AI tools. So for me, I think of this kind of like an investment in my career or an investment in helping stay kind of ahead. And sometimes you have to spend a little bit to know like what's happening and to experiment with new tools. So I will subscribe to ChatGPT to make sure I can learn about large language conversational models so I can experiment with that technology. Or I'll use Claude AI, which is another large language model. And sometimes each of these models, they're like similar, but they have differences that you need to start becoming aware about. Or subscribing to Midjourney so I can generate images, or subscribe to Leonardo AI or Replicate or Suno or Runway ML. And actually Runway ML is a really interesting one because you can like train these custom models on there, but the training can actually be quite expensive. And probably in the past 4 years, I've spent over $500 on training models. And obviously this is not sustainable or available to everyone. So there are many affordable solutions to learn more about AI and just get started. So one that I recommend is Google Gemini. You can go to Google Gemini just from the browser, and you can start experimenting and learning how it is to kind of work with a conversational large language model and see like what the output is like, whether that is improving writing or getting ideas and brainstorming, or is it for getting reviews on a concept, or you can also go to Bing Image Creator if you want to create images using DALL-E. And what I'd also definitely recommend as someone who works at Adobe is to use Photoshop on the web. And Photoshop on the web has, sometimes many people don't even realize that you can actually use Photoshop on the web browser. And it's been very much designed and built around an experience that is geared for new users. So if you felt in the past that Photoshop has potentially been a little bit too complex, Photoshop Web could be perfect for you. And you can use all the Firefly and generative technology that I was showing you previously in Photoshop Desktop on the web. So definitely would recommend checking that out. And there's a 7-day free trial for that. And then I'd also recommend going to Adobe Express, which is also on the web. And there's a 31-day free trial, and it has a lot of the same technologies as well, like generating images using generative fill. So really would recommend these as some places to get started. If you're, maybe an advanced user and you've kind of started already, and maybe you're an all-nighter type of person and you really want to get into like the details, you can look up more about Comfy UI, which is a note interface to create complex, more like complex Stable Diffusion workflows, which is a form of AI model for image generation. And then there's also a website called Civet AI, where you can download and access a lot of these models to run locally on your computer. And there's also a website called Replicate, which if you're looking to start to actually build or develop experiences and you need APIs to run some of these AI models, this is the place that you can go. And continuing off of like some of the resources for where you can play and learn, I'm going to just show you a little bit more about some of the work that I create when I play. So for instance, in the past year or so, I've created probably over 15,000 images with Firefly, Midjourney, Dolly, and Stable Diffusion, all these different AI image generation models. And I was taking on a personal project where I wanted to create this character design of this kind of Western cowboy with like this metal fist and this like snakeskin hat. And I was just creating all these different variations to try to find the perfect angle of the image that I wanted to create. And after making many different variations, I kind of come with this result here that I really liked. But then, maybe I wanted to expand it a bit. So I put it onto a canvas in Photoshop. I expanded that out with AI. Then I added in this kind of snake over the shoulder because I wanted to tell a story that, a little bit add more interest into the scene. And then I wanted to add kind of this like grungy texture and like change the sky a bit to make it feel a little bit more kind of rustic. And then I added in some text overlay over the image. And when you do something like this, especially when you are designing for creatives, you're actively using the tool that you're designing for, and you can have more empathy for your users and the kind of pain points that they're going to experience when they're using your tools. And I feel showing that when you don't interact directly with the tool you're building for, and then when you're going to user research, you won't be able to resonate as much with the kind of things that they're starting to say, and like you start to hear the same pain points over and over again. So it's just such an amazing practice to actually be using the tools that you're designing for and just have fun, because when you're having fun and you're creating things, and it's going to inspire you, and then there's going to be these new ideas that just start to like emerge in your brain when you are actually creating things. And like while making this, I'm like, oh, it'd be really cool if I could just generate a sky, because I AI generated an image, but then I had the composite in the scene. So there's just these workflows you just start to think about that you would have never thought about if you weren't actively like creating and playing. And here's another kind of variation of a poster design that I was creating. Here's another one here. And then another one here. So this was like a really fun project to create in Photoshop, combining a lot of different AI services together. And in addition to creating, it's one thing to kind of create something and just maybe have it for yourself and the kind of personal fulfillment of being creative. But it's also really important, from my experience, to be interacting and listening to other creators online and actively sharing your work. So when you make something and you share it, people will like it, or they'll give comments on it and feedback. And when you see that people like something, it gives you feedback that whatever you're doing is going in the right direction, and that people resonate with it. And if you get enough of that feedback, you start to become way more intuitive and reactive to what people like. So if you don't have that intuition built up by interacting with people, you're not going to be able to react well when like a new technology emerges and you need to be really fast to like jump on a trend. So it's just super, super important to like be involved in a community, whether that's on like Reddit or on Twitter, or known as X now, or being on Instagram and posting images on there and just getting feedback. So being social and sharing and collaborating with people is been really important for me. So now after talking about the process of play, I want to show a bit about the process for going from concept design to shipping a great product experience with like an AI feature. So the very first step is to collaborate with PM or the product managers on concepts. And at this stage, there is really no bad idea. And what you need to do, or what we've seen, is you just write down everything you've learned from that process of playing and experimenting. So many times when you start a project, especially when you're trying to design something that's never really been done before, it can be very intimidating to just kind of get started. And you just need to get started by writing something down. And that is a very simple kind of way. You don't need any visuals, just write everything that comes to mind and just put it down on paper. The next thing to do is to start building a concept, like testing and pitch deck for these different concepts. So as you're building this, collaborative document, working with the team, working with product managers to build these concepts, start to build a design in Figma or whatever design tool you prefer that actually takes each of these ideas and starts to visualize it in a way that other people can understand more easily. Because ultimately, like as the role being a designer and experience designer, you're also in many ways a storyteller to the stakeholders that you're working with. Because if you can't tell a good story about the product that you're trying to design for, people won't get excited about it and they won't understand it, and then your users won't understand it. So ultimately, like I very much feel like the work that I do and the work that our team does is like storytelling and then making sure that story aligns with what our users need. So then after that kind of aspect of kind of building out those different concepts, then it's putting those concepts in front of users through user research and feedback. And this is very much an iterative process. So, you might have one round of research to gather some feedback. And then what you do is you hear what users are saying, and then you start to iterate and make refinements on those designs. Or you can start to filter down to the designs that you feel like have the most potential impact. Because you could have like 30 designs, but maybe only like 2 of them are the ones that you can actually approach reasonably within the next year and are the ones that will create the most impact for the business. So the research will help you refine and prioritize those concepts. And it can also help you make changes to the design to make sure you're building an experience that they understand and just matches their expectations as a Photoshop user. And then next, after kind of this iterative process of research and design, especially for designing for AI, designing for products that are leveraging AI, you need to collaborate really closely with legal and ethics. So thankfully at Adobe, we have a great team of AI ethics representatives that are actively helping us make sure that what we're designing is safe and less biased when we generate results. And it's also great having a legal counsel to make sure that we're building a product that aligns with Adobe standards, and that also when people use our tools, they know where they can go to read the right guidelines for our tools. Then after that, it's building an MVP or like a minimal viable product for the design in code inside of Photoshop. And then what we do here is we're working really closely with product management to define what our MVP is and to start building the overall experience. And this is where I absolutely rely and love working with product managers like Amy, because many times from a design perspective, especially with all the concepting that we do, it's so easy just to have a million ideas. And that's where a lot of times the product manager kind of steps in and really sets the scope for the project and makes sure that what we're building is reasonable in the next couple months or the next year, because it can be pretty easy for all these ideas just to come in, and then what happens, you actually can't even build anything because you just have too much to do. So setting an MVP and working with product management and is super important. And the last couple of steps that I'll kind of walk through here is to then work with corporate strategy and marketing. So for example, when we were building generative fill inside of Photoshop, we were creating these these large marketing videos that our executives were sharing on the Adobe Max main stage to kind of gather feedback from the audience and create excitement within the community. And in addition to that kind of step of corporate marketing and strategy, we then will ship the feature to pre-release and beta, where it's not in the full general audience version of Photoshop. This is where we gather even more feedback from a wider audience of people, so we can help kind of fix the minor issues in the experience. And then next, after beta and pre-release, we will ship out of beta to the general audience version of Photoshop to millions of users. And this is where we can hear from users online and in person at Adobe Max. So it was really fun being at Adobe Max last year and just seeing all the features that we were working on with generative fill and generative expand, and actually just see it on the main stage and just hearing everyone's reaction in the audience when these features that you've been building for over a year are actually now released publicly. And it's just an amazing feeling to go from writing a concept down on a piece of paper to then it being presented here on a main stage. In addition to that, it's also just so much fun to see how people are using the tools that you make on TikTok, Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, and I'm not sure if the audio is playing here, but it's been really fun just to see all these videos that people make where they're showing what they can create with generative fill. So it's a lot of fun. So it's
Hey,
at the
Davis,
time.
your
Oh
audio
yeah.
is not coming through actually.
Okay. No worry.
Yeah, I think I know why. Most likely what you'd need to do is if you go to the mic icon,
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to see. Give me
Oh,
one second.
audio.
There should be an option to share audio as well. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. These videos are pretty fun to see.
When you're sharing, go to the sharing. 1 second. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Where?
Thank you.
Manav just shared it. When you're sharing your screen, there should be an option in the top that says share audio. Do you see it?
Mm,
Where the green bar is?
I don't. I think for now, the audio is great, but it's not crucial. So
Okay.
you can if you are on TikTok, just search for generative fill, and there's just a ton of these really fun videos of people using the feature, and this was been so helpful for us as a team because we actually we hear from user feedback and we hear people online, but you learn so much when you actually see the work that people are making. So, and I kind of see it as a sign of success in some way. Like when something's actually going viral and people are creating work with it, you've done something right. So yeah, you can kind of see some of those on TikTok or on Instagram, but they're a lot of fun. Now, in kind of the next phase of what I'd like to share with everyone here is, what I've learned along the way. And many times in this design process, it's never perfect. There's ups and downs, and there's gonna be mistakes made. But there's some big things that I've seen and learned that I think could also be helpful for others here that are designing creative tools or just kind of interested in some of the big things that came across to us. And one of the first things that we talk about a lot is how non-destructive workflows are crucial for professionals. And I think this is even more important when you're designing for AI creative tools, is that when you generate an image or you ask ChatGPT for some advice, it's going to give you something close to what you want, but it's never going to be perfect. And what we hear time and time again in almost every research study when we like present new AI features, that people want manual controls so they can non-destructively edit the results that were made. So if you generate an image of a cat wearing a red hat in like a baseball field with AI, you still need ways that you can refine that prompt and make it better so it matches the actual creative vision that the user has. So does that mean you can generate again, or you can generate similar variations, or maybe you can like ask for the hat to change color? All these things have to be non-destructive and editable. That's a big philosophy that we have, especially in Photoshop. The second thing is that AI should enhance human creativity and not replace it. So this has definitely been really big for Adobe, especially because our audience, the people who use our tools, are creatives. And especially when there's such a dramatic shift in technology and kind of the pace that content can be created, what we always hear again in user studies is like users want to maybe generate if they do want to generate an image, they want to have creative agency over how the image is generated, so they feel like creativity and like the soul of their creative process isn't taken away, but they can just add creative input, whether it's adding a sketch or adding reference images, or just how they can spend more time into the image, and it's not just this like one-click solution without refinement. And third is to meet users where they are with contextual suggestions. So an example of this with generative fill and generative expand that was showing previously is that instead of building a whole new experience in Photoshop, like this whole new window, we built directly into the selection tools and to the crop tool inside of Photoshop, because those are tools that users already use today. And we knew that like there was on average like 40% of users use the selection tools on a monthly basis. So there was already a ton of users using those tools. So build into those existing workflows. And then another one, like the fourth thing here that's really interesting, is that groundbreaking ideas will often come with scrutiny at first and may not always user test positively. So when something hasn't been done before, or maybe is introducing new technology that has many unknowns, there's going to be people who are for it and there's going to be people who are against it. And neither side is right or wrong. Like both are presenting very valuable insights, and especially when you do user testing, some of the technology is still progressing. And for example, with generative fill, when we were first doing our user testings for that technology, if you try typing in a cat into the image, it might just come out as like a blob. Like you expect this like photorealistic cat that's like positioned in the right way, but the technology just wasn't there yet. So actually a lot of our user testing very early on was relatively negative, because like the overall concept was kind of still brewing, but it's just the technology wasn't there yet. So I think in times like this, where you aren't getting always positive user testing, is where you really need to have strong conviction through your instincts and through the play that you've done early in testing, where you know you're on the right track, even regardless sometimes things that could potentially say otherwise. So you have to kind of, if you still feel really strongly about it, and that's what we did with some of the features we were building, you just can't give up and you have to keep moving forward. Again, this doesn't apply to like every scenario. It's just scenarios when things sometimes are just so like new that haven't really been seen much before. Also, in addition to that, it takes a village and you have to lean onto others' strengths. So for instance, to build generative fill in Photoshop, takes way more people than one might initially imagine. And you have to be aligned on a clear vision that brings everyone's unique skills together. In addition to that, focus on the strengths that you know that you're great at. So for instance, like as an experience designer, I'm going to focus on the what I know I can bring to the team, but then lean on obviously the work of the engineer or the product managers. So generative AI trends and things that you should get excited about. So in addition to thinking at the work process at Adobe and looking at some of these kind of mantras and things that we've learned along the way, there's also a lot of trends that I think will be really helpful for you all to know in your own work. So for instance, generating video content is starting to become something that's more and more prevalent now with new technology. And here's an example of a video that was created with Sora. And here's an example of 2 videos that were generated off of images. So in kind of some of your creative explorations and ideas, start to think, hey, like, could generative video start to be integrated into these workflows? How can this benefit the user that I'm targeting? And especially with social media today, video content just becomes ever more crucial for grabbing people's attention. In addition to that, beyond just generating videos and generating images, you can now start to generate 3D models and environments. So this can even be done from simple text prompts. And just like imagine a future where entire immersive environments or video games could be entirely generated. And next, like, what about real-time image generation? So today, as kind of I was showing you in Photoshop, you can generate an image from a text prompt, and it might take from 5 to 30 seconds to generate some images. But we're entering into a space where the technology is getting so fast and getting so good that you can actually start to type and just generate an image instantly on the canvas. So thinking about experiences for creatives that are just real time. And then next, conversation-based editing. And this is something you can kind of do today a little bit with ChatGPT. And very much like today, people are familiar with editing tools that you're using very much manual kind of rudimentary controls where you're manually selecting things and manually doing the edits that you're familiar with. But we're entering into an age where if, let's say, you're building this sticker design and you start with something like a cat, you can just start to ask it, hey, could you make the sticker design into a cute koala bear in a blanket with a coffee? And it'll understand the style and the format of the existing image and start to manipulate a new one based off of that. So thinking about how conversational AI can actually like augment and speed up the creative process for someone, and they don't need to do everything manually. And lastly here, I think what we're starting to see is this kind of emergence of brain-computer interaction, where you can start to build experiences that allow users with physical impairments to create in ways that they couldn't have before. So imagine if you have this idea and either it's through an implant or it's through a headset or maybe something even kind of more like streamlined. You can just imagine an idea, let's say of this butterfly next to a house with clouds, and it could just be presented before you in front of your eyes, or maybe even as you're dreaming, these ideas are kind of coming to life. And I think we're very much entering into an era where like this can certainly be the case and kind of change the creative process entirely for people, especially those that may have impairments that prevent them from creating in the ways that they traditionally could have. In conclusion, we kind of walked through some of the things you can do in Photoshop today. We looked at some places where you can start to learn about generative AI and how you can kind of integrate it into your own creative process, like Photoshop on the web and Adobe Express. We saw some ways that I've been creating and playing in my own creative process. And then we looked at how you can go from concept designs in like a Figma file or on a scratch pad to then going to that presentation on a large stage to millions of users. And then lastly, we're looking at some of this new technology and what trends we're starting to see and how this also can be integrated into your creative process and also into some of the things that you're building as well. And I'm here to answer any questions. And if you want to learn more about Adobe or brainstorm on an idea, you can find me on ADP List and you can search for Davis Taylor Brown. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Davis. I personally really enjoyed seeing, all the generative AI work you're doing with Adobe. Generative fill, I've seen a couple videos on it, but, just getting to learn more about it was really good. I think we have a couple questions in the Q&A.
Yeah.
Do we want to get to those first?
Sure. Sounds great.
So what kind of jobs are available in the generative AI art area?
I assume this might be specifically to Adobe, or maybe they can answer if it's more broadly, but I can talk probably more closely to Adobe. We have an Adobe Design website where a lot of the new design roles are being listed. And actually, most of those design roles, you'll see there's like a label next to it called like generative AI or like Gen Tech. So especially at Adobe, there's been such a dramatic pivot towards AI because we very much see how much it's changing the creative industry. So we're very much looking for designers that are interested in this space. And I'd almost say if someone was applying to Adobe today and they weren't aware and actively integrating this kind of technology into their creative process or into the kind of apps that they're building or the experiences they're building, that it would be a disadvantage. So there's lots of roles opening, and very much it's in line with kind of some of the things I was sharing, like integration of AI into Photoshop or into Illustrator or onto like InDesign or into Premiere, like looking at how that technology can integrate into our tools and kind of augment the existing tools that we have.
Sounds good. Would you know of any AI communities that the attendees could join?
Yeah, so there's a lot of communities on LinkedIn that are pretty great. So if you just, so like what I do on honestly a regular basis is I just like go on LinkedIn or Twitter and I just search for like AI or generative art, and I just follow as many of them that I can to like get to have that content to start to show up on my feed. I don't maybe recall the exact ones by off the top of my head because I just follow so many of them. And then many times I just follow as many people in that space that I can too, because what you want to happen is that when you go to your LinkedIn feed or your Twitter feed, you just want to see that content and you just need to be following enough people who are posting about that content. And especially if you want to be dedicated and focused in this space, you just need to have a constant stream of people sharing cool things. So I don't have a direct community on mine, but definitely on Twitter and LinkedIn, just follow people who seem like top contributors in that space. And that's what I do on like a regular basis.
Sounds good. So, what are some of the soft and hard skills you recommend for junior designers to develop in the context of design for AI?
Yeah. So for what I've seen is, especially at Adobe, designers can have a lot more impact on the product than maybe they first imagine in terms of like getting an idea out that's their own. So I very much recommend that if you are a junior designer and especially you want to get more visibility to your name and to the kind of work that you do, you just have to start documenting your work, make a video, make something, and just start to like publicly share that in your Slack channels or in your group channels. And I really like the form of a video. So actually for generative fill, when the concept first came around, I created a video showing the idea, and then I presented it into a channel which had like 600 people, and enough people resonated with the idea that the concept started to form from there. So as like a skill, I recommend just kind of having like, confidence to like present your ideas and hear feedback, and just like not working in a silo, just like always look for people to collaborate with and share your ideas, even if you are a junior level, like because anybody can like come up with, it doesn't matter where they are, whether they're like a principal level or junior level, can have amazing ideas, and you just need to like share it and be confident about it.
The next one we have is, do you see the AI features you're creating will replace other existing features in Photoshop? How would you and your team deal with this?
It's a good question. So what I kind of covered a bit in some of the slides was about how we want to meet users where they are with the existing tools that they use. So very much like the crop tool is an example of a tool that's existed that likely won't go away because you always need the ability to crop an image. But we wanted to expand on it with generative AI so that traditionally, if you expand the image with a crop tool, you're going to get just transparent pixels. But now you can actually expand it and generate new content into the scene. So like that's an example of like a tool where we didn't replace it, but we just built onto it to make it better. And there's like with generate image, for instance, like that's an experience where maybe somebody who traditionally may have drawn something, they felt like they need to draw something entirely from scratch, doesn't need to always as much anymore. But I think the user that is proficient and skilled at drawing is going to still prefer and want that experience with the existing tools. So we want to kind of do a combination of like make experiences for new users that don't have maybe the same like professional background to like draw a beautiful illustration from scratch, but want to create great looking images, but also expand on tools that we know people love, like the crop tool and selection tools already. So hopefully that kind of answers to your question.
Another one we have is, I used to go to workshops about how designers can support AI products. And then I think you spoke about designers doing more workshops with engineers. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so sometimes in like the design process, it's easy to kind of, especially what I've seen at Adobe, it's easy to like silo off where designers are doing their one thing and they're just ideating entirely with design. And then engineers are kind of just doing their own thing over here, and then products doing their own thing over here. But what I've experienced is like you have to constantly be getting feedback from both the engineers and the designers and the product managers to make sure you're building like the right solution. Because honestly, there's so many times where I'm getting like just as good or potentially better feedback from engineers because they just like think in a way that you're not able to like think and solve problems because they're looking at it from a perspective of like integration into the feature and like how everything's going to like link together. And it's been so crucial and essential to like on a regular basis just like set a one-on-one with an engineer. So like if I'm working in design, I'll send a message on Slack and like, hey, like appreciate your help so much. Could I have 30 minutes of your time later today so I can get your review on an idea? And this is an engineer that typically would be surprised that somebody reaches out to them for design feedback. But like you go to them because they have these ideas that other people probably won't tell you because they know so much about the code and how everything's linked together. So it's been super important to just like reach out to engineers, have like one-on-ones, and just get their thoughts on your designs.
I don't think we have more questions.
Cool. Well,
Ooh, there's one
appreciate the
more.
time.
There is one more that just
Oh,
came in. If you don't mind answering that.
the one from Bonnie?
Um, I think so, yeah.
Okay. Are there particular technical parameters that come with designing the generative AI space? So I get it, and maybe I'm answering this question correctly, so you can tell me if I'm going in the right direction. But the question I get often asked is if designers who are designing for AI need to have very strong like technical backgrounds in terms of like coding or in like training models and that kind of thing. And what I've seen and experienced is that you don't need to have this like super technical understanding of how like the models are built. You just need to have experience working and playing with this technology because that's kind of what it comes down to. Like if you're building an experience, like you just need to know what the technology does and you need to know what value it can bring for customers, but you don't need to like know every detail about like how like the model actually works. Like if you, even though like I've been working in AI for a couple of years now and building products, if somebody asks me technically how the model works, I probably can't give like a good straight answer. I'd probably have to like make up something, honestly. But I'm designing for those features because I know what value it brings to our customers. So I think many of the strategies of just general like design can still apply to AI design, but you should just be familiar with AI technology that exists today.
Sounds great. I think that was all, Davis. Thank you so much. Really great talk, and I really hope our audience was able to grasp all of the knowledge that you've kind of given them in the last hour.
It's a lot. Yeah, well, thank you, everyone.
And of course, we're excited to see you tomorrow at judging.
Yep.
And I hope some of these people, I hope they're also participating in addition to attending our talks. So maybe you get to give them feedback on some of the things they submit.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think so. That was our last talk for the day, everyone. We do have a game night planned in an hour and a half, if any of you would like to join. But that's about it. And we're just gonna end the call now.